I trusted my sister with everything. My marriage. My house. My biggest fears. If someone had asked me to name the last person on earth I thought would ever keep secrets with my husband, I would have said her without hesitation. Then one ordinary Tuesday night, I saw a notification on his phone that made my stomach drop. It wasn't the message itself. It was the name. My sister. And when I finally learned how long they'd been talking behind my back, I realized I hadn't just missed one lie. I'd been living inside hundreds of them. I'm 32, and until last year, I honestly believed I had the kind of family people wished they had. I live outside Columbus, Ohio. My husband, Ethan, and I had been married for 6 years. We'd built a quiet life together, nothing flashy. We both worked full-time, spent weekends fixing up our little house, argued over what movie to watch on Friday nights, and hosted family cookouts whenever the weather cooperated. My younger sister, Rachel, was 29. She wasn't just my sister. She was my best friend. Growing up, we shared everything. We borrowed each other's clothes, stayed up talking until 2 in the morning, covered for each other when one of us got into trouble, and promised that no matter what happened, we'd always choose each other. People joked that we had our own language. Sometimes all it took was one look across a room for us to know exactly what the other was thinking. When I married Ethan, Rachel cried harder than I did. She hugged him after the ceremony and laughed through her tears. "You better take care of my sister." He smiled. "I promise." Back then, I believed him. For years, there was never a reason not to. Rachel came over almost every Sunday. Sometimes she'd help me cook. Sometimes Ethan would grill while we sat on the back patio talking about work, dating, family, or whatever ridiculous thing had happened that week. She was practically part of our household. She had a spare key. She knew where we kept emergency cash. She knew Ethan's birthday, his favorite coffee, even which grocery store had the bread he liked. None of that felt strange. She was family. If anything, I was grateful that my husband and sister got along so well. It never crossed my mind that getting along could become something I should pay attention to. The first thing that felt different wasn't dramatic. It was so small I almost ignored it. Rachel texted Ethan directly about my birthday. That shouldn't have bothered me. She wanted to surprise me. Of course she'd ask him what I wanted. When my birthday came around, they'd planned a dinner with my parents and a few close friends. It was wonderful. I remember thanking Rachel afterward. "You two pulled it off perfectly." She smiled. "It wasn't hard." Ethan laughed. "We make a good planning team." At the time, I thought it was sweet. Looking back, I think that was the first time I noticed they exchanged a look that seemed to last just a second too long. I brushed it off. People notice things differently after they already know something is wrong. At the time, I knew nothing. A few weeks later, Ethan started putting his phone face down. Again. Not exactly suspicious. People do that. I asked him once if work had been stressful. He shrugged. "My boss won't stop emailing me." Made sense. He worked in project management. His phone constantly buzzed. I didn't think twice. Then Rachel started mentioning things I hadn't told her. One Saturday afternoon she said, "So, are you still thinking about repainting the guest room?" I looked at her. "I never told you that." She paused for just a fraction of a second. "Oh, I must have heard it somewhere." I laughed. "Maybe." But something about the pause stayed with me. Another time she asked, "Did Ethan ever fix the leak under your kitchen sink?" Again. I hadn't mentioned it. I assumed Ethan had. Why wouldn't he? They were friends. Friends talked, right? Months passed. Nothing exploded. Nothing dramatic happened. Just dozens of tiny moments that didn't seem important enough to question. Until Thanksgiving. My parents hosted dinner. Rachel arrived late. Ethan was already helping my dad outside. The second she walked into the house, she asked, "Is Ethan still in the backyard?" "Not." "How are you?" "Not." "Where's everyone?" "Just." "Is Ethan still in the backyard?" I teased her. "What? You're saying hi to him before me now?" She laughed. "I need his opinion on something." That answer sounded perfectly reasonable. Except, she never asked him anything after dinner. At least, not that I saw. That night, lying in bed, I asked Ethan, "What did Rachel need?" "Hmm? You know. Your opinion." He looked confused. "Oh. I don't remember." Neither of us mentioned it again. Christmas came. New Year's. Life continued. Then one evening, Rachel stopped by unexpectedly, while Ethan was still at work. We spent an hour drinking coffee. She looked distracted. I finally asked, "Everything okay?" She forced a smile. "Just tired." A few minutes later, Ethan walked through the front door. The second he saw Rachel sitting in the kitchen, he froze. Only for a second. But I noticed. His expression changed so quickly that if I'd blinked, I would have missed it. Then he smiled. "Hey." Rachel smiled back. "Hey." The conversation felt careful, like both of them were choosing every word. When Rachel left, I asked, "Everything okay?" "Sure." "You looked surprised." "I didn't know she was coming over." "Fair enough." Still, something felt different. Not wrong. Just off. Around that same time, Ethan started taking calls outside. Again. There was always a reasonable explanation: better reception, work, clients, deadlines. I kept finding excuses because I trusted him, and because I trusted Rachel. One Friday night, I woke up around 2 in the morning. Ethan wasn't in bed. I walked downstairs. He was sitting on the back porch, phone in his hand. He looked startled when he saw me. "You scared me." "Sorry." "Everything okay?" He locked his phone almost immediately. "Couldn't sleep." I sat beside him. Neither of us spoke for a minute. Then I rested my head on his shoulder. "I'm glad I married you." He kissed the top of my head. "I'm glad too. If you'd told me then that I'd soon question everything about that moment, I'd have laughed, because I still believed I knew my husband." A few days later, Rachel invited me shopping. Halfway through lunch, her phone buzzed. She looked down, then quickly turned it over. I smiled. "Secret boyfriend?" She laughed. "I wish." "Then who's making you hide your phone?" "No one." She changed the subject immediately. I let her. Because sisters don't interrogate each other over one text. At least I didn't. Then came the family barbecue that changed everything. My parents' backyard was full. Kids running around. Music playing. Everyone talking over everyone else. I went inside to grab more drinks. When I came back, Ethan and Rachel were standing near the side gate. Neither noticed me immediately. Rachel quietly said, "She can't know." Ethan answered something I couldn't hear. Then Rachel noticed me. Both of them smiled almost instantly, too quickly. "What can't I know?" I joked. Rachel laughed. "Oh. We were talking about Dad's birthday present." "Oh." Made sense. Again. Everything always made sense. Until it didn't. That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. For the first time, a thought entered my mind that I hated. What if? No. Absolutely not. Rachel would never do that. Neither would Ethan. I actually felt guilty for even thinking it. The next morning, I apologized to Ethan. He looked confused. For what? For being weird lately. He hugged me. "You've got nothing to apologize for." I cried after he left for work. Not because I thought he was lying. Because I hated myself for doubting someone I loved. For a while, I forced myself to stop paying attention. Whenever something felt strange, I'd tell myself, "You're imagining it. They're family. Stop creating problems that don't exist." It worked. Until one evening, about 6 weeks later, Ethan was in the shower. His phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I wasn't trying to snoop. Honestly. I only glanced because I thought it might be his boss. Instead, I saw one line on the lock screen. "Rachel. Did you tell her yet?" My heart stopped. "Tell me. What?" I stood frozen. The screen went dark. I put the phone exactly where it had been. When Ethan came downstairs, I acted completely normal. I hated every second of it. That night, I barely slept. The next morning, I called Rachel. I was thinking about coming over. She sounded nervous. Today? Yeah. There was a long pause. I'm actually busy. With what? Just stuff. She'd never answered me like that before. Never. After we hung up, I sat in my car for almost 20 minutes trying to convince myself there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe they were planning an anniversary surprise. Maybe they were helping organize something with my parents. Maybe. Every explanation sounded weaker than the last. Over the next week, I noticed even more. Whenever Rachel visited, Ethan somehow already knew she was coming. When I suggested inviting her to dinner, he'd casually mention, "I think she's working tonight." How would he know? He wasn't on her schedule. One evening, Rachel corrected a story I was telling before I'd even finished it. It was something only Ethan had been there to hear. She caught herself immediately. "So, Ethan told you?" She looked at him. Then back at me. "I think so." Neither sounded convincing. That was the first time I saw fear in my husband's eyes. Real fear. Not guilt. Not anger. Fear. And suddenly, I couldn't stop noticing it. Every buzz of his phone. Every glance across the room. Every unfinished sentence. Every awkward silence. It all piled together until I couldn't tell whether I was seeing the truth or losing my mind. Finally, one Friday evening, Ethan left his phone charging while he ran outside to help our neighbor jumpstart a car. The screen lit up again. Another message from Rachel. This time, it wasn't just a preview. The entire message appeared. I can't keep lying to her much longer. I felt every ounce of blood drain from my face. My hands were shaking before I even realized I'd picked up the phone. The screen unlocked with Face ID disabled, because it had already recognized him moments earlier. The conversation with Rachel was still open. I stared at it. Then I slowly scrolled upward. And the very first message I read made me realize this wasn't just two people secretly talking behind my back. It was something far more complicated than I had ever imagined. The first thing I noticed was that there weren't hundreds of flirtatious messages. There weren't heart emojis. There weren't romantic nicknames. There weren't plans to meet behind my back. Instead, the conversation looked careful, almost clinical. My eyes landed on one message Rachel had sent about 3 months earlier. Rachel. She asked me if everything was okay. I told her yes. Ethan had replied a minute later. Ethan. Thank you, I just need a little more time. My stomach tightened. More time for what? I kept scrolling. There were long gaps between conversations. Sometimes days. Sometimes a week. Then another message caught my attention. Rachel, I hate keeping this from her. Ethan, I know, I hate it too. That was the message I'd seen a preview of. I wanted to believe there was still some innocent explanation, but hiding something from your wife with her own sister didn't exactly leave room for optimism. Then I reached an older conversation. Rachel, did the specialist call? Specialist. My heart started pounding. Ethan's reply came almost an hour later. Ethan. Yes. Not the news I hoped for. I frowned. Specialist? I couldn't remember Ethan ever mentioning a specialist, or a doctor's appointment, or anything medical. The next messages only confused me more. Rachel. Are you going to tell her? Ethan. Not until I'm sure. Rachel. She's going to feel betrayed. Ethan. I'd rather she hate me than watch her panic over something that might not even happen. I stared at the screen. Nothing made sense anymore. Just then, I heard the front door open. The neighbor thanked Ethan for helping. My pulse shot through the roof. I locked the phone and put it exactly where it had been, just as Ethan walked back inside. You okay? He asked. I forced a smile. Yeah. It was probably the worst lie I'd ever told. That night, I barely slept. Part of me wanted to wake him up and demand answers. Another part was terrified of whatever those answers might be. By morning, I'd convinced myself there had to be more context. Messages can be misleading. People say strange things over text. Maybe I'd misunderstood everything. But I couldn't shake one question. Why Rachel? Why not me? That afternoon, I called in sick to work. I drove aimlessly for almost an hour before ending up outside Rachel's apartment. I sat in my car debating whether to leave. Finally, I knocked. She opened the door, looking genuinely surprised. You weren't supposed to. She stopped herself. I caught it immediately. I wasn't supposed to what? She stared at me, then looked past me as if hoping someone else had come instead. Can I come in? I asked. She hesitated. That hesitation hurt almost as much as anything else. Finally, she stepped aside. Her apartment looked exactly as it always had. Coffee mug on the counter. Blanket thrown over the couch. Half-finished crossword puzzle. Everything normal. Except us. I sat down. She remained standing. You've been talking to Ethan. She closed her eyes, so she wasn't going to deny it. Yes. For months. Yes. My throat tightened. Why? She looked like she wanted to answer. Instead she whispered, I can't. You can't? I promised. You promised my husband that you'd lie to me? Tears immediately filled her eyes. I never wanted to lie. But you did. Yes. Every single time I asked if something was wrong. I know. And you watched me question my own sanity. She covered her face. I know. That only made me angrier. If you're having an affair with him, just tell me. Her head snapped up. What? Are you? No. She sounded horrified. No. Then what? She looked completely defeated. I need Ethan here. I stood. I'm done. As I reached the door, she quietly said, I've been trying to protect you. I froze. Protected me? From what? That evening, I asked Ethan one simple question. Have you been lying to me? He looked at me for several seconds. Then he answered with complete honesty. Yes. No excuses. No pretending. Just, yes. That one word hurt more than if he'd tried to argue. I saw the messages. He slowly sat down. I figured you eventually would. You figured? I was hoping you'd hear it from me first. When? He rubbed his hands together nervously. When I knew everything. I don't even know what everything means anymore. He looked exhausted, not guilty, just exhausted. I need you to trust me for one more conversation. I laughed bitterly. Trust? You've been keeping secrets with my sister. I know. You let me think the worst. I know. I thought you were cheating. I know. So explain. He took a deep breath. Last fall, I went to my annual physical. I waited. My doctor found something unusual. Every bit of anger inside me paused. They thought it might be serious. I didn't say anything. I didn't tell you because they weren't sure. The specialist ordered more tests. I remembered the messages. Specialist. They thought it could be an inherited heart condition. I stared at him. He continued quietly. My dad died at 48. I nodded. I remember. I never told you the full story. He didn't just have a heart attack. He had an undiagnosed genetic condition. I felt the room spin. The doctors wanted to know if I had it too. And Rachel knew? I ran into her at the hospital. That surprised me. What? She was volunteering there one afternoon. I was coming out after my appointment. I didn't plan for her to find out. He looked down. She asked why I looked terrified. So I told her. I remembered every strange conversation, every awkward silence, every hidden glance. I begged her not to tell you. Why? Because I wasn't diagnosed. I didn't want you spending months believing I might die if the tests came back normal. I couldn't speak. He continued. The results kept getting delayed. More scans, more blood work, more appointments. And every time you asked what was wrong, I lied. Because I thought I was protecting you. I sat there silently. Then another question hit me. So, why were you texting all the time? He smiled sadly. Because your sister kept telling me I was making a terrible mistake. I looked at him. She wanted me to tell you immediately. Every week. Every single week. He handed me his phone. Keep reading. I opened the thread again. Now I read it differently. Messages I'd assumed were suspicious suddenly meant something else. Rachel. She deserves the truth. Ethan. Not until the final results. Rachel. She's your wife. Ethan. I'm trying to spare her months of fear. Another. Rachel. She's starting to notice. Ethan. I know. Another. Rachel. Please don't wait too long. There it was. Not two people growing closer. Two people arguing about whether I should be told. I started crying before I realized it. I thought. I know what you thought. I'm so sorry. Ethan's voice cracked. I never imagined it would look this bad. I believed him. But believing him didn't erase the hurt. You should have trusted me. I know. I had the right to decide whether I wanted to carry that fear with you. I know. Instead of answering, he walked to a drawer. He pulled out a folder. Inside were appointment summaries, test results, referral letters, insurance paperwork, months' worth of medical records. Every date matched the conversations. Every appointment explained another secret. Then he handed me one final paper. The most recent result. Negative. Nobelium inherited heart condition. I stared at it. You knew? Yesterday. So, you were finally going to tell me. Tonight? I laughed through tears. The day after I found the messages. He nodded miserably. I couldn't have timed it worse. The next morning, I met Rachel at our parents' house. This time there were no secrets. She hugged me before I even reached the porch. I'm sorry. I know. I hated lying. I know. I should have told you anyway. I nodded. Probably. But I also understand why you were trapped. She looked relieved and heartbroken at the same time. I kept telling him he was wrong. I know. He thought he was protecting you. I know. We both laughed weakly. What a disaster. The worst. We sat outside for almost 2 hours. Talking. Actually talking. About fear. About trust. About how good intentions can still hurt the people you love. Ethan and I didn't magically fix everything overnight. Trust doesn't return because someone says they're sorry. It returns through honesty, through consistency, through uncomfortable conversations. He apologized more than once. Not because I demanded it. Because he genuinely understood what he'd taken from me. He hadn't just hidden medical tests. He'd taken away my ability to stand beside him when he was scared. That hurt more than the secret itself. Months later, things finally began feeling normal again. Rachel came over for Sunday dinner. Ethan grilled burgers. The three of us laughed about how terrible we'd all been at keeping secrets. Then Rachel looked at both of us. No more protecting each other with lies. Ethan nodded. Deal. I reached across the table. Deal. Looking back, I understand why I jumped to the worst conclusion. When trust disappears, your imagination fills every silence with fear. I really believed my husband and my sister had betrayed me. The truth was different. They had made a terrible decision. Not because they didn't love me, but because they convinced themselves they knew what was best for me without letting me choose. Love isn't just protecting someone from bad news. Sometimes love means trusting them enough to carry it with you. And that's the lesson the three of us learned the hardest way possible.